Live from London, this is Global Business.
Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Sally Baudet.
And I'm Li Jianhua. Our top stories. Spain, Ireland and Norway formally recognise Palestine, hoping their joint action will encourage other European nations to follow suit.
French President Emmanuel Macron wraps up his state visit to Germany, calling for a more coordinated defence strategy for Europe.
Argentina's president heads to the US to court Google, Meta and Apple in his latest attempts to promote his economic reforms.
Flying high. It's the one-year anniversary of China's C919 commercial aircraft taking to the skies.
And in leap of faith, the crew on China's space station take a 9-hour-long spacewalk.
Spain, Ireland and Norway have officially recognised Palestinian statehood. They hope their coordinated action will encourage peace efforts and lead to other European countries following suit.
Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez called the recognition an historic decision. In response, Israel has pulled ambassadors from Madrid, Dublin and Oslo, denouncing the move as a reward for Hamas. This means 146 of the 193 member states of the United Nations now recognise Palestinian statehood.
Now, in a moment, we will speak to Johannes Pleshberger in Oslo. But first, let's cross to our correspondent, Ken Brown in Madrid. Hello, Ken. So what has the Spanish government been saying about this decision?
Yes, a historic day, according to Pedro Sánchez. Earlier today, Palestinian statehood officially recognized in this building behind me in Moncloa, the PM's residence. Probably the most fanfare of all countries happened here. Pedro Sánchez spoke early in the morning. Then some of his ministers, like the Exterior Minister, José Manuel Álvarez, spoke after that cabinet meeting. Pedro Sánchez went into some detail. He said that he envisions a Palestinian state coexisting peacefully alongside an Israeli state, with Gaza and the West Bank connected by a corridor, the capital in East Jerusalem, all under the authority of the PNA, the Palestinian National Authority. Borders are those set in 1967, recognized by the UN Security Council and by the European Union. Let's have a little listen now to a little bit more of what Pedro Sánchez had to say today.
Se trata de una decisión histórica.
This is a historic decision that has a single objective, and that is to help Israelis and Palestinians achieve peace. The recognition of the state of Palestine is not only a matter of historical justice to the legitimate aspirations of the people of Palestine. It is, moreover, a peremptory necessity if we are all to achieve peace.
Well, not everybody is on board. We heard a lot of reaction, angry reaction from the right of Spain's political divide, many saying that this is a reward for Hamas and the October 7 attacks, echoing Israel's reaction to this declaration. Pedro Sánchez insists that this is not against Israel or an Israeli country, which he called a friend nation. It isn't against the Jewish people either. And he said that it's not, certainly not, an endorsement of Hamas. Pedro Sánchez criticized Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, saying that he does not have a plan for peace, that there's no project for peace after this assault in Gaza that is trying to root out Hamas fighters. Pedro Sánchez saying that this is the only viable path to peace and a lasting two-state solution.
All right, thank you, Ken Brown in Madrid.
And now let's go to Johannes Pleshberger in Norway's capital there. Johannes, great to see you. So Norway is formally adopting its position on Palestine after an announcement last week. What has the reaction been there?
Well, it's the timing of the recognition that has been causing quite some criticism here in Norway. I spoke to many Norwegians today, and many of them are saying that the country should have recognized the state of Palestine much earlier, especially because neighbor Sweden has done so already back in 2014. But Norway's government says this has been a necessary timing and a necessary day to take this stand now, because according to Norway, the moderate voices in this conflict are losing ground, and now it's time that other European countries are following suit, the government says. Let's listen to what the Palestinian ambassador to Norway had to say, Marie-Antoinette Sedin.
It's important in any time, but it didn't happen before. And we've been waiting and expecting that the international community will do something and take a step forward to put Israel under accountability and to force Israel to accept a two-state solution, because it's the only path out from this conflict.
So while some are saying that the recognition came too late, others, especially among the Norwegian opposition, are saying it's too early. According to the second largest party here in Norway, Høyre, the Conservative Party, the recognition is too early because it's uncertain right now whether this will bring us any closer to a political solution in the Middle East. And today, once again, the Norwegian government is participating, or trying to participate, in the peace, in the creation of peace in the Middle East. It has done so already earlier in the 90s during the Oslo Accords, which, however, failed, according to experts, because the accords were flawed and there hasn't been much of a monitoring process to them. Let's see whether today's move of Norway, Spain and Ireland can lead to more peace between Israel and Palestine.
Thanks, Johannes. That is our correspondent, Johannes Fleshberger, in Oslo.
Well, the Palestinian flag has been raised outside the Irish Parliament, where Prime Minister Simon Harris has been speaking.
Firstly, it is our view that it is time Palestine takes its place among the free nations of the world, that it can pursue self-determination, self-governance, fulfil its obligation and avail of its rights under the UN Charter, and that it might have territorial integrity and sovereignty. Secondly, it expresses our belief that Israelis and Palestinians alike have an equal right to self-determination, safety, security and dignity, that no child, no matter their nation, is worth any less than another. Thirdly, it cements our fundamental conviction that the only just solution to the Israeli-Palestinian generation-long conflict is a two-state solution.
Our correspondent Jen Copstake has more from Dublin.
Reaction in Dublin has largely been very positive to the recognition of the Palestinian state. In fact, if anything, the dozens of people that we've spoken to on the streets say that it hasn't come soon enough. In 1980, Ireland was the first EU country to endorse an independent Palestinian state, the idea of an independent Palestinian state. And in 2014, Sinn Féin put forward a motion that was voted on in both houses and passed to recognise a Palestinian state. And we spoke to its spokesperson for Foreign Affairs and Defence, Matt Carthy, on why it has taken so long to reach this point.
This Parliament actually supported a Sinn Féin motion to recognise the state of Palestine in 2014, a decade ago. And in many respects, there was a lost decade when the world turned a blind eye to Israeli breaches of international law, to essentially war crimes that have happened every single year since then. And because of the international community failing to say stop to Israel, they have now led to the situation where Israel feels that it can commit genocide without any consequence because they've never faced any consequences before. And I think slowly the world is realising that we must say stop, otherwise the Palestinian people will be completely obliterated, that there will be no prospect of a Palestinian state.
Now, the next major step is the appointment of an Irish ambassador to the state of Palestine, and here in Dublin, the ambassador of Palestine to be appointed, and that's going to come in the coming days. We've spoken to the incoming ambassador about her feelings on this day and her appointment.
I have a mixed feeling, a feeling that I'm proud to be recognised as a state of Palestine to be recognized as the state of Palestine. And the other feeling that is like feeling about my people. We have the right to be happy, to be proud, to have this minute as a historical minute, to be recognized our right of self-determination to be recognized. So between what's going on against my people in Palestine and this special day in Ireland, I have this mixed feeling, but I'm still proud, and our people deserve to be proud of this recognition.
The Palestinian flag is flying above the Irish Parliament, and the Prime Minister, Simon Harris, is hoping that other EU member states will follow the country's lead in recognising Palestine to build pressure for a ceasefire and to release Israeli hostages. Jen Copestake, CGTN, Dublin.
Emmanuel Macron is on the final day of his state visit to Germany, the first by a French president in 24 years.
Macron has used the trip to call for a more coordinated defence strategy in Europe. He's been presented with an International Peace Prize. The trip is seen as a show of unity ahead of EU elections, where far-right parties are expected to do well in both countries.
And our correspondent Peter Oliver is in Berlin. Peter, great to see you there. And Macron made calls to buy European during his visit to Germany and advocated for a European preference in key sectors such as in defence and space.
Yeah, we've heard some ambitious plans from Emmanuel Macron during this state visit. I mean, he's been talking about serious increases to EU budgets. That EU budget currently stands at around $1.9 trillion over a 7-year period. He wants to see that upped by, well, around 500 billion every single year. The reason for that is he wants to see the European Union invest as one in green transition technologies, also in things like AI, but heavily in defence and in creating a defensive union within the bloc. What's not going to go down too well, and hasn't gone down too well here in Germany among some of the politicians, is that he's suggesting that a lot of that money come from borrowing, something which is anathema to the current incumbents in the finance ministry, the Free Democratic Party, and Christian Lindner, the finance minister and their leader in particular. That's going to be a very tough sell for Emmanuel Macron. He has spoken at length about the importance of that German-French relationship, and that when everybody's on the same page, it is good for Europe. The problem is they're not on the same page on a lot of issues at the moment. It was a big reason why he's got the state visit this time around. He's always here in Berlin, not always, but quite frequently. This time around, he got the state visit. It's the big official recognition that we are close friends, Germany and France. He met with President Steinmeier. He's been with Olaf Scholz. He's with Olaf Scholz right now in the two cabinets. He also received the Westphalian Peace Award down in Munster earlier on Tuesday. That was for his efforts to try and stop the Ukrainian conflict getting to the situation that it ultimately got to back in 2022. So he's been receiving the plaudits. There is a lot of business to be done, and that's currently what's happening right now. And we're expecting that to go on into the evening at the fancy Schloss just to the north of the capital from where I'm speaking to you now.
Well, Peter, as you said, on a lot of issues, the two countries don't see eye to eye, or they are not on the same page. Will this trip smooth things over?
It'll have smoothed some things over. Emmanuel Macron's done very well in the press here. He gave this big speech in Dresden yesterday in front of the Frauenkirche, where in 1962 Charles de Gaulle also gave a speech. Like Charles de Gaulle, he did some of it in German, which has been well received here. The man clearly knows his accusative from his dative, his D from his der, from his das, and that has shown in the response he's received here. However, it doesn't change that on big issues like Ukraine, where Paris and Berlin are united in the same support for Kiev, they're not united in the way that support is given. We've heard from France that Paris may send troops in some kind of training capacity to Ukraine. Germany is very much against that. Olaf Scholz seeing that as only escalating the conflict. We've also heard, well, as I mentioned earlier on, Macron wants to see borrowing by governments to pay for investment. That's going to be a very tough sell with the current German government. In fact, there was an op-ed penned by both Emmanuel Macron and Olaf Scholz in the New York Times that was released earlier this morning, and notable considering a large chunk of Macron's speech on Monday was all about this getting money into the EU budget. Not a single word about borrowing from in that op-ed. Basically, the German side, we understand, has said we're not going to be talking about that publicly I'm sure they are talking about it right now. What we did hear from Emmanuel Macron was him saying that when it came to these upcoming EU elections, well, we needed to move away from nationalism, or Europe itself was at risk.
A Europe of peace and security means a united Europe and a Germany and France which work together to face common risks. That's what reality is all about. If you're a nationalist now, you'll get the defeat of Ukraine, and peace in Europe will become impossible for a very long time to come.
Well, those EU elections happening just next week in France. National Rally are gaining in the polls, expected to take quite a few seats from Emmanuel Macron's En Marche party. Here in Germany, of course, Alternative for Germany expected to take up more seats in the European Parliament as well. Another far-right party there. So an address to those upcoming EU elections. Has this smoothed over the problems between France and Germany? Probably not, but it hasn't done them any harm.
Thank you very much. That is our correspondent, Peter Oliver in Berlin.
Now, last year, Germany claimed the unenviable title of the world's worst-performing major economy.
But it appears to have turned a corner, if new reports by the International Monetary Fund is anything to go by. Following a visit to the country, the IMF concluded that German economy is beginning to recover, with inflation easing and energy prices returning to normal.
All right, let's head back to Berlin and this time join Trent Murray. Hello, Trent. So, can Germany say with confidence they've weathered the worst of the economic storm?
Well, look, according to the IMF, it's at places like this on the high street of cities like Berlin that the recovery is going to happen. They say it is going to be about consumer-led recovery. In other words, people having more capacity to spend in shops and in their private lives. And for that reason, they are saying the IMF may just be on the money here when it comes to Germany's numbers starting to recover. What we know is that they say after 4 years of being in essentially emergency mode, having to deal with COVID-19 and also the Russian gas shut-off, as they describe it, following the war in Ukraine, that they are starting to turn a corner. In fact, the numbers that they're giving us is that this year Germany will grow by 0.2%. It's not a lot, but it certainly is better than recession, and then 1.3% in 2025. But there is some criticism in that report too. They say that the German government needs to change some things if it wants to try and improve its economic situation moving forward, namely the controversial debt brake, as we call it in this country. Now, that is a constitutional restriction on any government to not borrow more than 0.35% of GDP. The IMF is saying that that handbrake, that restriction, is going to hamper Germany's growth. It's called on politicians here to have a very real national conversation about maybe doing rid of that debt brake, but certainly the response from the finance minister today, Christian Lindner, an economic libertarian, I should say, he says that's not a conversation he's not willing to have anytime soon.
Now, Germany has an aging population. How is that an economic problem?
Well, it's a big economic problem, according to the IMF, because what they are effectively saying is that many baby boomers and people of that generation are going to start to leave the workforce, and when they do, Germany just does not have the workers to replace them, certainly the workers to replace them in order to keep up the kind of economic might that it has enjoyed over the past 2 to 3 decades. What the IMF is saying by numbers is that as baby boomers retire, and there's immigration waves, that the annual growth rate of Germany's working population will fall by 0.07% per year. Now, that is the highest of any G7 country, and so I think it paints a very real picture for the government here that more needs to be done in order to get people into the workforce. One way they are looking at doing that is to try and ease immigration rules to welcome more workers from abroad. They've just allowed dual citizenship this year, something which has always been forbidden in this country. That is about trying to get more people into the country because, as one newspaper has put it here today, unless Germany does something very, very different, we could start to see what they call the Japanification of Europe's largest economy. In other words, being perpetually stuck in stagnation.
All right, thank you so much. From Berlin, that is Trent Murray.
We're watching CGTN Still Ahead. Israel reacts to the news that 3 European countries have officially recognized Palestine as a state.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos? And unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
I think it should be more global cooperation.
I would like to hear more the voice of the developing countries.
Globalization has lifted more than 1 billion people out of poverty.
The great transition has to happen. It's a necessity.
Well, China and the United States are important powers in the world.
What unites us is much more than what divides us. And I believe China is committed to this agenda.
Join me, Juliet Mann, to set the agenda at these times every weekend on CGTN.
Events have consequences. Words create impact.
One more offensive in a long line of battles that's been ongoing for more.
Just got to be careful here with some gunshots. Excuse us.
The world today matters for your world tomorrow.
The number of casualties is growing quickly.
Why, this is one of the hardest hit towns in the region.
The world today, every day on CGTN.
Welcome back. Gaza officials say at least 21 Palestinians have been killed and dozens more injured in fresh Israeli strikes on a tented camp west of Rafah.
This new attack comes amid international condemnation of Israel's strike on Sunday, which hit a displacement camp in Rafah, killing 45 Palestinians, many of them children. Israel said that strike was a tragic mishap and was not intended to cause civilian casualties. The UN Security Council is set to meet in an emergency session later to discuss the incident. Meanwhile, Israeli tanks have reportedly pushed into the heart of Rafah, despite the global outcry over Israel's military operation.
Our correspondent Sarah Coates is in Tel Aviv joining us now. Hello, Sarah. So first, what is Israel saying about the news today that Spain, Ireland and Norway have now officially recognized Palestine as a state?
Hello there. Really nothing as yet, but there is one figure from Spain that's causing a lot of controversy here in Israel. That is the Premier, Yolanda Diaz. She actually posted a video of herself on social media, ending it with, "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free," also calling for the European Union to sever all ties with Israel. Now, this, of course, is causing a lot of backlash here, with her being labelled as an anti-Semite, saying that she's inciting hatred. We've heard from Israel's ambassador to Spain. He's lashing out. He posted on X that Spain, as a democratic nation, should have no room for anti-Semitic demons. Well, Israel's Foreign Minister, Israel Katz, is also reacting. He actually posted a photo of Diaz, also the head of Hamas in the Gaza Strip, Yahya Sinwar, and Iran's Supreme Leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, on X, and he is calling for Sanchez, the president, to fire her, saying that he's complicit in inciting murder of Jewish people if he doesn't let go of Diaz. So certainly a lot of controversy here. She has since responded around 5 or so hours ago. She says that our commitment to human rights will not stop due to any threat, saying that the only thing that matters is getting a ceasefire, prosecuting war crimes and stopping the genocide. So very, very interesting that we haven't heard anything else really from Israeli officials on such a day when there's been such a large announcement.
The Israeli government, of course, is under huge international pressure, particularly after what happened on Sunday in Rafah. I wonder if you could give us an insight into what impact that's having domestically.
Well, Israel is becoming very, very isolated. It continues to maintain that it is acting in self-defense and also in accordance with international law. Now, you mentioned domestically, internationally, quickly. Key allies are certainly abandoning Israel very, very quickly. But we have heard in the wake of that strike today from the IDF spokesperson Daniel Hagari. He held a press conference just a little earlier speaking out about that incident, which killed at least 45 people. He says, at this stage, it's too early to determine the cause of the fire that broke out in this area in Rafah, claiming that these munitions that were shot by the Israelis were two 17-kilo bombs, saying that they were too small to actually cause such a large fire to break out. But also domestically here on the ground, this is causing a lot of friction. There was a protest in Haifa, which is north of where I'm standing, overnight. At least 9 people were arrested, and they were protesting this incident. And we do need to mention that Haifa is an area of coexistence, so certainly a lot of pressure on the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, not just internationally with these key allies abandoning him and speaking out against him, but also here in Israel with these continued protests. But Benjamin Netanyahu, he remains defiant. He says we will fight until the very end. And it was just late yesterday that he came out to say we will raise the flag of victory.
All right. Thank you very much. The View from Tel Aviv, that is Sarah Coates.
China says tensions in the Red Sea are a spillover from the Gaza conflict, and Beijing is willing to play a constructive role in solving the crisis.
Foreign Minister Wang Yi made the remarks during a meeting with his Yemeni counterpart, Shahir Mohsen al-Zindani. In recent months, Yemen's Houthi rebels have launched attacks on ships in the region in solidarity with Gaza. Wang said China hopes all parties can resolve their differences through dialogue. Al-Zindani is in Beijing to attend the upcoming China-Arab States Cooperation Forum.
The leaders of Egypt, the UAE, Bahrain and Tunisia are also in Beijing to attend the forum this week.
The forum was established 20 years ago to help improve relations between the Arab states. Our correspondent Joe Jassin reports.
Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has arrived in Beijing at the invitation of Chinese President Xi Jinping, along with the leaders of Bahrain, Tunisia and the United Arab Emirates, who are on state visits to China until Saturday. President Sisi will be attending the 10th Ministerial Conference of the China-Arab States Cooperation Forum that marks its 20th anniversary this year. President Xi will deliver a keynote speech on Thursday at the opening ceremony of the ministerial meeting, which NSA has been a key instrument in driving China-Arab relations since 2004. Earlier this month, she said in a congratulatory message to the Arab League summit held in Bahrain that China-Arab relations are currently in their best shape of all time, expressing the hope that the Beijing meeting will further deepen cooperation in various fields to benefit the two peoples. China has been the overall top trading partner of Arab states for several consecutive years, with the annual trading volume growing from around $37 billion in 2004 to nearly $400 billion last year, an increase of more than tenfold. Now, China's Belt and Road Initiative has been integrated with all of the 22 Arab states' development schemes, taking shared China-Arab growth to the next level. On the political front, China has held the Arab League, an upholder of the independence and autonomy, which has long been committed to the unity and self-improvement of the Arab world, promoting the peaceful and stable development of the Middle East. Chinese President Xi also said that Arab countries are playing an increasingly important role in strengthening solidarity and cooperation among members of the Global South and safeguarding their common interests. Ministers of the Arab states and the Secretary General of the Arab League attending the China-Arab Forum this week are expected to echo the latest Bahrain declaration from the Arab League summit, which advocates for an end to Israel's war in Gaza and a two-state solution to the Israel-Palestine conflict. Zhou Yaxing, CGTN, Beijing.
Early voting is underway in South Africa's general election. Around 1.6 million of the almost 28 million strong electorate have been allowed to cast their ballots early. On Wednesday, the rest of the country will head to the polls in the country's 7th democratic general election since apartheid ended in 1994. After 30 years of dominance, the governing ANC is expected to face its toughest election. Opinion polls suggest it could lose its outright majority in parliament. Our correspondent Sumitra Naidu is in Johannesburg.
Voting began yesterday, the Independent Electoral Commission allowing those citizens, the elderly, those too ill, pregnant women, really giving them an opportunity to vote in this election, as many will be unable to, stand in queues and in cases get to their respective voting stations. These voters would have applied in advance. I see officials visiting homes to give those applicants an opportunity to cast their vote. For the rest of the nation, 28 million registered voter stations will open tomorrow morning, 7 a.m. and will run through until 7 p.m. Tomorrow, of course, declared a public holiday to accommodate voting throughout the day. The IEC declared readiness last week, the security cluster handling the safety of these elections, also announcing its readiness over the weekend. There will be security on the ground to ensure voters are safe. There's also IEC security safeguarding ballot papers to ensure that these ballots are delivered and counted safely without any interference. This is the 6th national election, and for the first time, there's 3 ballot papers. There's one for the National Assembly. This will only have political parties on it. There's a regional legislature ballot, which allows you to vote for the candidate in your region, and there is now an additional ballot for each province. This will include parties and independent candidates as the provincial, in the provincial government. Now, this really gives the voter more choice and, in some respect, more control over who's running their province or city, for instance. Being on the ground ahead of these elections, talking to people, you definitely get the sense that people are both tired and frustrated and are looking for change. So many people expected to go out to vote tomorrow.
Well, Sumitra, we know the governing ANC has been in power for like 30 years. So why is this being called a tough election for the ANC, and what are the issues which have dominated the campaign this time?
Well, you're right. This is likely to be the most contested election since 1994, and analysts expect the biggest upset with the ANC. Early polls are showing that the ruling party could lose that majority. So many South Africans really expressing their anger and frustration with the ANC over issues around corruption, the electricity crisis. This has been going on for 15 years, and for the first time we've had no load shedding. It's been almost a month. Many saying that this is an election ploy. Apart from Eskom, other important infrastructure points are also in a mess. Transnet, the crisis at the ports, state-owned entities in general are costing the taxpayer and have become a drain on the economy. Other failures include housing and unemployment. Unemployment is near 33%, and the economy is barely making 1.5% growth. To be fair, there have been some successes, but they're being overshadowed by the failures.
Papua New Guinea is evacuating nearly 8,000 people living near the site of a deadly landslide, fearing another incident. More than 2,000 people are thought to have been buried in the massive landslide last week. So far, only 6 bodies have been recovered. The United Nations says the terrain is unstable and access to the area has been blocked, making rescue work difficult.
Belgium is to send 30 NATO F-16 fighter jets to Kyiv over the next 4 years. It's part of a new $1.1 billion military aid package from Belgium to bolster Ukraine's defences against Russia. The deal was signed during a meeting between Belgium's Prime Minister Alexander De Croo and Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky, who's on a trip to Brussels.
Georgia's parliament has voted to override the president's veto of a foreign agents bill, which has sparked a huge protest recently in the capital, Tbilisi. Under the bill, non-governmental organizations who receive substantial funding from overseas will have to register as a foreign agent. Critics say it will restrict media freedom and obstruct Georgia's chances of joining the European Union.
Europe will head to the polls next week. The member states of the European Union will give voters a chance to elect their representatives in the European Parliament. We've been looking at the party groups through the lens of candidates who have a particularly big profile.
Well, today we'll focus on Renew Europe, which was known as the Alliance of Liberals and Democrats, is positioned roughly in the centre of the European political spectrum. France's President Emmanuel Macron is one of the most well-known members.
Correspondent Michael Murillia has been looking at the French president's social media accounts, exploring how he presents himself and his party.
Emmanuel Macron has a powerful presence on social media. Nearly 10 million followers on X, 4.5 million on TikTok, and about 3.6 million on Instagram. Let's explore some of the themes that are coming through on his social media profiles. First of all, the theme of Macron, the state leader, the man who represents people on the global stage. Here he is meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping during Xi's visit to Europe a little bit earlier this month. So, Macron framing himself as someone who can flex some political muscle. Also, economic muscle. This is a post which focuses on the results that he's managed to achieve as part of the Choose France strategy. As you can see there, 56 projects, 10,000 jobs created. So the message there, Macron's saying to his followers, I can get things done. But this election is not just about France. It's about the entire continent. And this post is really interesting. He's on a state visit to Germany at the moment, and he posted this speech in which he actually delivers his address in German. This is really important because some of Macron's biggest rivals in the European Parliament are the EPP, and they have a very strong support base in Germany. So perhaps he's sending a little bit of a statement by posting that. Let's quickly focus on this theme. That's his engagement with young people. He's posted a lot of Q&A sessions on Instagram where he addresses the concerns of young people and answers some of their questions when it comes to policy. This seems like an attempt at showing those young followers and young voters that he understands exactly what they need. And that's important because one of his biggest rivals in France is the ID, and that's led by Jordan Bardella, who's just 28 years old. You can see him there during a TV discussion, a TV appearance. Macron's challenge will be to show young voters that he is in touch with their concerns. And that may not be that easy when you've got a 28-year-old who is one of his biggest challenges. It's going to be an interesting election. Sally, Xinhua?
All right. Thank you very much, Michael. So that's how Macron is presenting himself. But how is his message getting across in France?
And our correspondent Ross Cullen has been following the campaign. Ross, great to see you there. We know that Macron uses social media to engage with young people. He's on TikTok, Instagram and X. So how do they see him, and what could that mean for this election?
Well, Emmanuel Macron is 46. He's a young president, and he's very comfortable with smartphones, regularly filming selfie videos of him during a particular trip or a visit, hosting Q&A sessions with young people online, showing that he can listen to them, answer their questions and address them through social media that they themselves use. However, he does often post these videos from inside the opulent living quarters of the Élysée Palace. When he goes outside onto the streets of France's towns and cities, the president can sometimes get a bit of a different reception. The problem is that his party Renaissance is trailing the National Rally, the far-right nationalist populist party, of whom the most recognisable figurehead is Marine Le Pen. They're trailing the National Rally in the lead-up to France voting in the European Union election on the 9th of June. And so he and his party will be hoping that his social media strategy can cut through and can encourage more young people to come out to vote, and he hopes vote for his party.
Thanks, Ross. That is our correspondent Ross Cullen in Paris.
Now, you can get highlights from the week's news in Europe and China direct to your inbox from CGTN's Storyboard email newsletter. Sign up at europe.cgtn.com/newsletter.
You're watching CGTN Still Ahead. We'll be live in New York for closing arguments in Donald Trump's hush money trial.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe with Li Junhua and me, Sally Baudet. The headlines once more. Spain, Ireland and Norway formally recognise Palestine, hoping their joint action will encourage other European nations to follow suit.
French President Emmanuel Macron wraps up his state visit to Germany, calling for a more coordinated defence strategy for Europe.
Argentina's Libertarian President Javier Milei is in the United States for meetings with a number of top-level tech executives, including Meta's Mark Zuckerberg and Apple's Tim Cook.
And his spokesperson says the trip is designed to position Argentina in the world once again. For more, let's speak to our correspondent John Terrett in New York. John, great to see you there.
Yes.
Milei has been quite busy.
Yes. Thank you, guys. Yes, I know, and once again, technology/AI is at the forefront of Mr. Milei's visit. 53 years old, he's been the Libertarian President of Argentina now since December, and he does travel widely. In fact, the FT this morning was calling him a real jet-setter. I remember he was in Davos back in January, and now he's heading to San Francisco to wear flowers in his hair, no doubt, along with everybody else there, as the song says. And he does have quite a list of people to meet, and obviously AI/technology is top of the agenda. So among those people, we're told by his people, will be Elon Musk, potentially, also Mark Zuckerberg, head of Meta Platforms, Sundar Pichai, who's the head of Alphabet/Google, Tim Cook, no one bigger really, over at Cupertino there, Apple, and Sam Altman, who actually may be bigger in a way because he heads up OpenAI/Microsoft, which is one of the two companies that are in the forefront of AI development, the other one being NVIDIA. Now, he'll be speaking at the Bay Area Council Pacific Summit. I don't really know what that is, but he's going to be addressing it. And he's also going to the Stanford University Hoover Institution, which is a very big think tank, and that is headed up by somebody that you also know. It's Condoleezza Rice, who used to be the U.S. Secretary of State under the George W. Bush administration. So he'll be meeting her, and I'm sure other people in the field of politics and diplomacy and technology as well. Now, in April, just to sort of confirm, as it were, his sort of travel credentials. In April, he was actually in Texas at the Gigafactory with Elon Musk, and on the agenda then, we're told, were things like global birth rates, technology, and liberty. And of course, he is a libertarian politician. And it's interesting because here in America, President Trump, former President Trump, campaigning for November, went to meet the libertarians in Washington, D.C. to appeal for their vote, and actually got massively booed. Huge amount of coverage of that here. He was widely booed when he said, look, rather than accept your usual 3%, why don't you team up with me and we'll go all the way? And they booed him very, very badly. Anyway, I'm sure that Javier Milei would not do that, but his visit to San Francisco this week is going to be of enormous interest.
And John, Wall Street has returned to a T+1 stock trading.
Yes, but you don't know what that is, do you?
It's T+2 and
I do, and the reason for that is because I'm very, very... I know. Well, that's because I'm very, very old, and I remember not T1 but T7. T7, for goodness sake! Can you believe it? Basically, what there is still today, and there will be in the future, when you buy a stock or a bond or an ETF, there's a transaction date and there's a settlement date, okay? And in New York, for the longest time now, we've been working on T2, and they are in London as well, and they do in India and many other places as well, which means that the transaction takes place, and then there are 2 days before there is a settlement, before you get the stock in your portfolio and the company that sold it to you takes the money out. Well, now, as of today in New York, we're at T1. It's kind of next day delivery, really. So if you buy a stock or a bond or an ETF now, if I buy it today, Monday, then I get it tomorrow, Tuesday, and the money is taken out of my account tomorrow, Tuesday as well. I remember T7 when there was like a whole week before this happened, and this is all changing now. So if you buy a stock on Friday, for example, then you'll clear it on the Monday. And should there be a major public holiday like there was yesterday for Memorial Day here and Spring bank holiday there with you, then it'll all clear on Tuesday. So it's basically a next day transition here. Why is it happening? Well, the leading regulator, the SEC, can more or less do what it wants, and it wants it to happen, essentially because we have faster technology now. You know, things happen in the blink of an eye, and AI plays into this story as well. And also because it reduces the risk of something going wrong. If there was 7 days between a transaction and a settlement, there's time for the brokerage to go under there, cause all sorts of problems. So the less time for this to happen between transaction and settlement is probably a good thing. It removes a bit of uncertainty. It's not all plain sailing, though, for two reasons. First of all, the Forex market, the currency market, still takes 2 days to settle. So if you're buying into NVIDIA from London, just as an example, you will get the stock the next day, but if you're transferring money from pounds to dollars, it'll take 2 days. So we're going to have to work out what happens there. Either you'll have to send the money in advance, or you'll have to borrow money for a day, or if you have a really good client here, they'll have to give you the stock on trust that your money will settle a day after you actually get it. So that's a thing. And in Europe, you're 5 and 6 hours ahead respectively. So it potentially means lots of late nights for people, because we have a 9 p.m. deadline in New York when it comes to currency settlement, and so people might now have to sit up until 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning when they didn't have to. Canada and Mexico did this yesterday because there was no public holiday there yesterday. So today, Tuesday, they have a double settlement going on to settle what they did yesterday and today.
Well, John, from T7 to T1, this is definitely some progress. And so on a slightly different note, has the Donald Trump's hush money trial made any progress so far?
Yeah, let me keep it really straightforward and really simple, okay? What's happening here now is the closing arguments are taking place. We've just heard from the defense. We're now hearing from the prosecution as to why, in the case of the defense, President Trump should not be found guilty, and in the case of the prosecution, why he should. What will happen later today is the judge will give jury instructions on what they can and can't deliberate on, and then they will get the case. It could happen as early as this afternoon or evening Tuesday, or it's more likely to happen Wednesday. What no one can know is what the jury will decide.
Oh, thank you very much. That is our correspondent, John Terrett, in New York. Toyota has showcased a new type of engine that can be used in both hybrid and biofuel vehicles. The company says the prototype is smaller and more efficient than regular engines and will help reduce carbon emissions. Toyota expects production to begin when new EU emissions rules come into force at the end of 2026. Porsche has unveiled the first hybrid version of its most famous sports car, the 911. The move marks a major step in the evolution of one of the most recognizable cars in the world. Prices start at just under $170,000, with deliveries due towards the end of the year. iPhone has staged a rebound in China, with the smartphone shipments up by 52% in April compared with a year ago. The Silicon Valley giant has seen weaker performance in China in recent years, mainly due to stiff competition from domestic brands like Huawei. OpenAI has formed a safety and security committee led by board members, including CEO Sam Altman. This comes as the company begins training its next artificial intelligence model. Its current models are designed with generative AI capabilities, such as engaging in human-like conversations and creating images based on text prompts. But as models become more powerful, it's prompted safety concerns. The visa exemption agreement between China and Georgia has officially come into effect. Georgian passport holders can stay in China for up to 30 days visa-free. The inaugural flight from Georgia's capital, Tbilisi, arrived earlier at Urumqi International Airport.
The first plane from China Eastern's second order of the C919 jetliner, China's domestically made large passenger aircraft, has been delivered. Now, this coincides with the one-year anniversary of the C919's maiden commercial flight. China Eastern ordered an additional 100 aircraft last year after an initial order of 5 planes. Now, in the first year of commercial operations, those 5 C919 passenger jets have made more than 2,100 flights across 3 routes and accumulated over 6,000 flying hours. The aircraft have transported more than 270,000 passengers. And in a few days, it will fly its first commercial flight from outside the Chinese mainland when it travels from Hong Kong to Shanghai. John Strickland is an independent aviation business strategist, and he joins us now. Hello, thank you so much for joining us. Talk to us about the C919. I mean, we're used to Boeing, we're used to Airbus. Does it even begin to compare?
It doesn't compare as yet, but neither of the two leading global manufacturers can afford to rest on their laurels. You know, this is a long work in progress. You've described the trajectory of the last year with the aircraft operating successfully within the domestic China market. And indeed, that home market is perhaps its biggest strength as it moves forward and looks towards international success in future orders. The home market is so big that the manufacturer can count on many hundreds of aircraft orders in the years ahead. And so too in the surrounding region. Asia is, of course, one of the most rapidly growing parts of the world. And over decades ahead, there's going to be many more opportunities there. Having said that, the key is to deliver reliable and safe in-service operation. And that's the track record which is being built up right now. Because if the aircraft is going to break out into a diversity of international markets and truly start to compete with the product offerings from Airbus and Boeing, it has to get international certification around the world, particularly, for example, EASA, the European Safety Agency, and that's something which the company is aspiring to do next year. It may be ambitious, but certainly that is the target.
Talk to me about the passenger experience. I mean, you mentioned safety, which of course is a crucial issue, but it's also about passenger experience. What is this aeroplane like, sort of, to be inside it, to be flying in it?
Well, certainly the aircraft looks to be very comparable from a passenger point of view with aircraft in service today or on offer in the marketplace. It's in the size bracket of about 150 to 190 seats. That's comparable with some of the smaller versions of the Airbus A320 or indeed Boeing 737. Perhaps more directly comparable with Airbus's A220, which is a regional jet in a very similar size bracket, and indeed with a very successful Brazilian manufacturer, Embraer, who also provides very modern regional jets. In terms of seating, stowage bins, noise experience, the aircraft looks really comparable, and the dynamics from a point of view of an airline's wishes in terms of capacity and range also tick all the boxes, I would say.
Talk to me about the time frames here. You mentioned there's quite a process, and eventually, maybe one day, they might be able to challenge the Airbus and the Boeings. How long might that process take before we see China perhaps exporting its own aeroplanes?
Well, certainly the Asian market is one where I think that it will likely yield results sooner than other parts of the world. Boeing and Airbus are so well established around the world. Airlines are used to their products. They have all the infrastructure, be it pilot training, engineering and spare support. And as I mentioned, the key thing is for an aircraft to not only be safe, but reliable in service. And if we look at some of the current challenges that Boeing is facing, where they did indeed have two fatal crashes, and the spotlight is on them to come back to a demonstration of delivering quality, safe aircraft, that indicates no one, no matter whether you're top of the heap, can assume that there will always be that confidence in the airline community and indeed the travelling public. So there has to be a build-up of safe operation. Getting the certification is one thing, but once an aircraft enters service, snags do happen from day to day, aircraft breakdowns, spare parts are needed, and what Airbus and Boeing both offer is a massive worldwide network of spares and engineering support. Airlines can be confident that if an aircraft is forced to be grounded, it can be ungrounded pretty quickly. Spares can be obtained rapidly, even though there have been supply chain problems coming out of COVID. That is something I think will take COMAC quite some time to build up, running into, certainly well into the next decade before we really see a meaningful challenge to the two current incumbents.
Absolutely fascinating. Thank you so much for your views, John Strickland there. He's an independent aviation expert.
The crew on board China's Tiangong space station have experienced a moment they'll never forget, exiting the safety of their craft and leaping into space. The Shenzhou 18 astronauts carried out the spacewalk for almost 9 hours. CGTN's Zheng Yibing was at the Mission Control Center in Beijing.
After staying on China's space station for more than a month, the Shenzhou 18 crew conducted the first extravehicular activities on Tuesday, carrying out a series of important missions. While this mission marks the 15th extravehicular activity for Chinese taikwanauts on China's space station.
The extravehicular activities for the crew this time are intense. This includes the first ever installation of a protective device against debris and the longest duration spent checking the entire outer areas of the space station.
Shenzhou 18 Commander Ye Guangfu and crew member Li Guangsu conducted the extravehicular activities while the crew member Li Cong assisted from inside the space station. With the help of the robot arms, the Commander Ye Guangfu installed the protective device and then checked the solar panel of the Wentian Lab module. Li Guangsu climbed to 2 areas of the Wentian module to inspect them, before moving on to the Mengtian Lab module to inspect 3 areas there. And the mission lasted for 8.5 hours, achieving the targeted goals. The crew of Shenzhou 18 is in good health, and the space station is operating smoothly, providing good conditions for the future missions. Zheng Yibing, CGTN, Beijing.
Now, a painting by the Italian artist Caravaggio has gone on public display for the first time after being lost since the 19th century.
The masterpiece called Ecce Homo, or Behold the Man in English, was discovered 3 years ago as it was about to go under the hammer for a fraction of its value. It's been carefully restored and is now on show at the El Prado Museum in Madrid.
So let's remind you of the headlines once more. Spain, Ireland and Norway formally recognised Palestine, hoping their joint action will encourage other European nations to follow.
French President Emmanuel Macron wraps up his state visit to Germany, calling for a more coordinated defence strategy for Europe.
And it's the 1-year anniversary of China's C919 commercial aircraft taking to the skies.
And that is for Global Business Europe. Thanks for watching.
We've got more on all our stories at europe.cgtn.com. Do follow CGTN Europe on Facebook, Instagram and TikTok.
And you can also go to CGTN Europe's channel on the Telegram app or scan the QR code on the screen to get stories and updates sent direct to your phone.
Coming up next on CGTN Africa Live. We'll see you again tomorrow, same time, same place. From all of us here in London, goodbye.
Bye.